We're here for the deal makers, the revenue generators, the margin expanders, for distributors, manufacturers, and retailers, for the Lone Ranger, calculating rebates in spreadsheets, and the large teams overseeing complex deals. We're here to connect rebate experts with each other, to build a community of leaders and forward thinkers, to help you connect with other rebate experts so you can learn from each other and grow your careers. It's time to join the most exclusive community for rebate strategy on the internet. We're here for the rebate strategists.
Hello, greetings and salutations. You guys see
Good
that
afternoon, Reggie.
video? Hey, Mark. Did you see that promo video?
I did. There's some energy behind that, isn't there? Oh, wow.
Jeez, a ton of energy. I'm excited. Did you get your ticket for Catalyst?
I don't. Mine must be in the post, Reggie.
Oh
no,
man.
I'm joking. You know, I'd hope. No tickets are required for us, Reggie. We're on the VIP list. I'm confident.
No, you're on the super VIP list. I'm not even on that list, but maybe you could throw me some swag while you're up there. But listen, everybody tuning in, if you haven't already gotten your ticket to Catalyze 2023, please do. It's happening in Chicago this year. June 7th and 8th. Get your tickets. You see the ticker below at catalyze.enable.com. So, and if you're tuning in right now, tell us, where are you tuning in from? We want to know. Say hi. Come on, what do we got? Mike, what's going on, Mike? Oh, Mike wants to know how to get onto the VIP list. Well, listen, you need to get on the super VIP list. Join Mark. So, Mark, what you been up to, man?
Been busy. It feels like it's flown by since we had the last session, which was a bit of a recap. I've been conferencing, distributing socks, learning, more about what other industries do. I was recently learning all about pricing, but in the theme of today's piece, what I've been doing a lot of is collaborating, working with others, because I recognize that we sometimes we talk about networking. This is all about teams, people coming together, creating, those kind of relationships. And I think they exist in all walks of life. And so that's my subtle plug as to what we're talking about today, Reggie.
We are talking about collaboration. That's for sure. I'm glad that you brought that up, Mark. Without collaboration, without those relationships, it makes it very difficult and challenging to actually be successful in business. So we're going to be bringing on a guest, and just more than a guest, she's the guest of honor, to join us today, Christina Grenhart, Director of Content at Enable, to talk about a recent report that she published, which is titled Overcoming the Misalignment, Driving Friction Between Supply Chain Partners. And she's going to be bringing to light a lot of stats and insights related to collaboration, to your point, Mark.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I think we all agree collaboration's important, but it's so easy to say, but actually, what does it really mean? And I think that's what, where Christina's tried to go with, this report. And then I think the key word there as well is the first word, overcoming. It's all fair and well identifying a problem, but actually being able to bring solutions is so important. And that reminds me of probably one of the most inspirational leaders I've ever worked for. Their tagline was, Mark, come to me with solutions, not problems. And that, I think, when we publish reports, it's so important that that mantra is followed as well. And yeah, Christina's, certainly, focused on that. So yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about those solutions.
Yeah, and since we're both looking forward to having Christina here, without further ado, let's introduce our guest of honor. Christina, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for joining us. And listen, everybody, this is not an illusion. This is not a green screen. This is her beautiful, luscious, colorful hair that really blends in with her virtual background. It's amazing to see.
I should have brought the Chicago background for Catalyze, which I do truly match.
No, thank you for joining us. Yeah. So you published a report recently. And again, we're talking about collaboration, the importance of it, how to overcome misalignment. And you've probably uncovered a lot of key findings. What were some of like the most shocking data and insights that you were able to drive from your report?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the things that shocked me, we asked manufacturers, distributors, buying groups, and retailers about how they feel the supply chain pressures have impacted their relationships. And every single one of them, the majority of people said in a bad way, which may not be too shocking. But part of me was expecting at least one of those groups to be like, hey, no, we've figured this out. We've started to overcome this. But it was 2 in 5 distributors and buying groups. Only 2 in 5 reported stronger relationships, which tells us that 60% of those groups are saying like, hey, no, we're struggling. 2/3 of manufacturers say relationships have grown or have remained stagnant or grown weaker. And then only 25% of retailers believe relationships have grown stronger. So in the face of all of these mounting pressures, everybody's really struggling. And seeing that really drove home to me the importance of needing to talk about collaboration and how we work together, because a supply chain isn't just an individual company, right? It's a series of companies that work together, and that collaboration there is really key.
No, thank you for sharing that, and everybody tuning into this. If you're surprised by those, data and insights that Christina just brought up, I'm definitely surprised by it. One that you mentioned was that only 25% of retailers believe that their relationships have grown stronger. So you can see there's a disconnect in terms of what, where their perception is in terms of how they've been able to mend and, maintain connection with their partners.
Yeah, for sure. I think, I think like what we're seeing is just, maybe Mark can speak a little more to this, the struggle that businesses within the supply chain are having with, especially like rising consumer expectations, with mounting lead times, with higher costs. It's a struggle to get business done.
Yeah, I'd agree, Christina. I think, from my perspective, I was actually in industry when, in 2020, I still remember the announcements as they happened, whether that was from governments or your own employer. And you thought, oh my Lord, kind of, how are we going to get through this, both personally and professionally? But then actually there was this almost what we thought was going to happen, professionally almost didn't. It was almost like we were shut down for a month, and then it was like, okay, let's get this going again. But it's amazing what that month did in terms of stalling the supply chain and everything like that. And it really did test relationships. I think a lot of businesses had to show their true colors as well. There was because there was just not enough, what's the right way to put it? There wasn't enough flex in anything to accommodate Whether that was paying on time, whether that was supplying the goods, delivering on time, these kind of things. Everybody was kind of cut right back to the bone. And it was, I saw a post in our community, which was really empowering. I forget who it was. It might have been Andrew, who talked about the bank of goodwill, and actually how it's something that you build up. You make deposits to it, and then you call upon it. And I think that going into the pandemic, not many businesses had a good bank of goodwill stacked up. So when the tough times hit, it was only going to make it more difficult for them. And so I'm not surprised on that perspective. But what I am surprised by was throughout history generally, when things get bad, it pulls people closer together. But maybe that's where we saw the smaller percentage. Those are the ones who actually were already getting it right, and they were pulled closer together.
Yeah.
And we did.
Oh, sorry, Mark. I was going to say we did find that when, and I don't remember the exact number off the top of my head, forgive me, but those businesses that were already working more closely with each other, they saw better results.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it might have been 75% of businesses that were already working more closely together ended up seeing better results. But that was still a small fraction of the overall total of people we surveyed. So to Mark's point, if you already have those structures in place that allow you to work collaboratively, work closely with your trading partners, when bad times happen, you're in better shape. You are already set up for success. You don't have to worry about the same pressures that everybody else is facing.
Yeah, I'm sure there is an analogy which talks about, if you wait for the bad times to actually create that relationship, it's too late. That was something that needs. I know there's a saying, I just can't remember it, but it's too late by then. And I suppose for the other side of things as well, which I did like, Christina, was we talk about collaboration, but the report didn't actually talk specifically collaboration. It talked more about what behavior are you doing, so that you were able to establish if that is collaboration, because everybody's interpretation of the word collaboration can mean something different.
Yeah, a little different.
What in your mind is good collaboration? What does it look like?
Oh, that's a huge question. I mean, do we have an hour to sit here and unpack it? I think the heart of collaboration, especially for businesses in the supply chain, and this is a very hot take coming from me, who has not been in the supply chain, but I think it's alignment around core goals. It's understanding what each person in the trading agreement is looking to do, and working together to accomplish those things. Do you want to move more of a certain product at a given time? Do you want to increase sales volumes? Do you want more product to move off your shelves? And then how do you work together to support that with each other? And I think really, really critical to this is having that mutual understanding of what your goals are, so that you can work towards them together. Because what is business if not a relationship where we're both trying to achieve something, right? We both want to sell more. We want to, increase our margins. We want to increase our profits. And if we're doing that together, that's going to be at the heart of collaboration, is understanding what those goals are and how we can move towards them.
Yeah. And I think with that in mind, and based on personal experience, businesses that struggled were the ones where their core objective was to make more profit, and their supply chain partner was to make more profit. Now, to my mind, that's not an objective, that's an outcome. The objective is actually, how do we get there? But I saw a lot of trading negotiations where each side was purely in it for themselves. And you can imagine when that goes bad or comes under strain, there's no framework then to work with. So to my mind, you mentioned there aligning goals. That does require a degree of openness and honesty, because if you're a manufacturer, your goals are, maybe to get a new product range or to into the market or to increase exposure somewhere. There's so many different things, but that has to be aligned with the distributors who you're working with or whoever's retailing.
For sure.
And so I always think of it, and I think I used this analogy in the past. Yeah, collaboration, we do it at all parts of our life. If you get married, it's a collaborative arrangement. And you know what? You don't live your marriage by the vows you made on the very first day. Well, you should do, but there's always new things.
Yeah.
There's always new goals, new objectives, new things to challenge you. And so you're constantly working as a team. And it wouldn't surprise me that, strong marriages going into the same challenges that we talk about with the lockdowns, because they had those right foundations, were the ones that probably did well as well throughout, albeit living, at home for 2 years with each other would have probably strained most couples. Yeah, the reason I asked about that is just because some people think of collaboration as just teamwork.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, I see it as almost a parent figure of teamwork. It's, when you start getting into the goals and the objectives and everything and bringing that alignment, it's really important, because that alignment doesn't always naturally fall out either, which is why in theory you have a negotiation at a commercial point. That negotiation should be to bring as best as you can that alignment. And I think anybody commercially will agree there's give and take. So in terms of, we mentioned kind of the key takeaways in terms of best practices for collaboration. Was there anything that the report really highlighted to us that really resonated with you on,
Mm-hmm.
what are some of the key elements of good collaboration?
I think aside from that alignment, I think, one of the things that the report showed us is that manufacturers think that they're more aligned with their trading partners than they actually are. I think something like 60% of manufacturers are saying, oh, we have monthly meetings with our buying groups and distributors. But buying groups and distributors are like, no, we're having annual or semi-annual meetings. And I think that with collaboration, it's making sure that you have those dedicated times to sit down and talk to each other, and that you're actually communicating when you do. One of the things that the report showed us is that there's a gap there between what manufacturers think they're communicating and how they're collaborating, and what distributors and buying groups in particular are actually perceiving.
And I love the fact you mentioned the word communicating. So I still remember first starting out in business and being taught the communication cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Most people think it's the delivery of a message, but actually that's only halfway. And it's actually getting that message back and making sure the other party understood it.
Yeah.
And it feels to me that in business, we're seeing, the manufacturers think they've communicated, but the distributors clearly didn't feel or didn't get the message that was being communicated, and therefore don't feel communication exists.
Yeah, and I remember in our state of volume rebates report, I'll plug that a little bit here. We've got one for manufacturers, one for distributors, definitely worth checking out. But 44% of distributors told us that only purchasing and senior management are familiar with the details of their rebate programs. And 46% of manufacturers said that they wanted their trading partners to have an increased awareness of their trading programs. So even then, we were hearing from distributors and manufacturers that there's a gap, and there's something there with that communication that's kind of breaking down. And one of the things that this report uncovered is that only like 9%, 8 or 9% of distributors and buying groups use contracts. And so, before the show, we talked a little bit about why you wouldn't use contracts, and Mark had some great points there. But I wonder too if some of that communication is breaking down there because we don't have that single source of truth of the contract to go back to in some of these situations?
Yeah, I mean, I believe a contract is kind of the last step in the process. It's just really writing out what's already been agreed. But I also am a big believer in, and I think I talked to one of our clients about this, that signature on a piece of paper in that contract, that things are only just getting started at that point. That's the start line. And so much work has to go into it afterwards. I think I said something like an agreement doesn't end once there's a signature involved. That's just, you've got to work at it. And I think, to the point about not having everything documented, what we went through you needed to be quite agile and fluid, especially as a distributor where potentially you needed to source product and your supply chain was struggling because of various challenges. What I observed was that good relationships understood that you might need to actually go to a competitor, somebody like that, to get products. Because ultimately anybody in sales will probably appreciate the cardinal kind of sin is to not have stock. That's the absolute number one no. And so buyers were actually spending more time sourcing stock than they were actually negotiating commercial terms, because that was just number one on their priority list. And so the fact that not everything was documented doesn't surprise me. Hopefully we're now seeing a bit of normality return and things like that. But there's always going to be an instance where there's a distressed purchase. Maybe the volume of trade just doesn't justify it, or you can't even get a commercial agreement because you don't give that manufacturer or that your supplier enough business to justify one. Ultimately, there's always going to be some form of T&Cs. Normally in the print, you can hardly read on the back of a delivery note or something like that. But for me, they're not the relationships that this report was focused on. What struck me was how many of the big relationships, where you've got businesses trading millions and millions and they can't play nice together, or they don't feel they play well together. And you're thinking, wow, how is that impacting the end consumer?
Sure.
Ultimately their customer. I think when we speak to, and again, we've seen people in the community talk about it, ultimately everything that should be focused on is up to that sale to that end consumer. Because if that sale doesn't happen, nobody in the supply chain is actually technically going to win. So that collaboration side of it is really key. I've got one more question, Reggie, if you don't mind, and then
of course.
So in terms of and it did come up actually after the report, Christina. Somebody asked me, but I'd welcome your view on this. They said, okay, so when you've got your contract and you're working together, the landscape changes. What do you do with your trading partner? Should you just carry on? How do you kind of navigate if things maybe you've promised you're now not going to be able to deliver?
Ooh, well, I'm a huge proponent. I hate the phrase, it's better to ask forgiveness than permission. Usually if you have to ask forgiveness, you've already hurt someone, you've already done damage. So little hot take for me. But I think it's really important to be upfront with someone and say, hey, we can't meet this obligation that we put forth in our contract. And I think that was in Andrew's post in community. I'm pretty sure you're right that it was Andrew. And he had said, if we can't make this goal, maybe could you guys cut us a break this one time? And they were willing to do that because they had put in that goodwill and they had that positive relationship. And so I think it's really important to be forthright with your trading partners, to be like, hey, we're not going to be able to achieve this threshold. We're not going to be able to meet this goal. But, you know, is there something we can do to meet halfway? How do we pull that back? And to have that constant back and forth with each other to figure out how you can both come out winners in a situation that might not be great. I think that's really critical.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think if you, we use the term in the UK, kicking the can down the road, but I believe it's better to get in front of things, rebase expectations, because ultimately whatever's happened in the past, you know, everybody knows what's happened. What's more important to a relationship is where you're going in the future.
Absolutely.
And that is a piece that, continually evolves and changes. And it's so important for organizations to make sure that both sides are on the same page as to what the future looks like in that respect. So Reggie, I'm sure you've got some questions for Christina.
Yes, for sure. Before I do, big shout out to Kale, because Kale, our senior community manager,
Kale found it.
remembers everything off the top of his head. But he said that, hey, Mark, it was Andrew Yo in the rebates community, rebate strategist community, said you need to make deposits to the relationship bank account. Through all the supply chain nightmares of COVID, we worked very hard at maintaining frequent open communication with our suppliers. So no, and Christina, you kind of nailed it on the head when you made reference to exactly that post, right? Collaboration, it's all about that open communication. We talked about goals, we talked about alignment. Goals change over time, right? Impacts happen. And those impacts, to your point, Mark, is what the end user could potentially see if both parties, manufacturer and distributor, do not have their ducks in a row to support each other. So when it comes to having and establishing that cadence in terms of reviewing how well they're trending in terms of performance, looking at inventory levels to ensure that there's no stockouts, working through the various motions of allocation, and prioritizing the end user, I think at the end of the day, everybody wins within the value chain. So no, this is all good conversation. And Christina, is there anything like to you that wasn't surprising, and or where do you see this evolving into in terms of software that people could potentially use? And this might be a shameless plug, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I was probably unsurprised about that gap between manufacturers and distributors. I was also very unsurprised that buying groups really have it together, which I like I said, I think that's unsurprising because they're used to having that one-to-many relationship. They have to manage their member groups as well as their suppliers. So, buying groups really have it together. I'm probably not the right person to have this take, but if you're a small distributor and you want some more power, join a buying group. Maybe not the right person to have the plug, but everything that I've seen says that buying groups have, tremendous power and really have it together when it comes to taking care of their member groups. And like I said, I wasn't super surprised to see that gap between manufacturers and distributors because we've seen it before. We saw it with the State of Volume Rebate report as well. And so I think this just really drove home the need for these two entities to work much more closely together and to really figure out how to interface with each other in a way that's positive so that everybody gets what they want done, that they meet their goals.
No, I love that. Go ahead, Mark.
Can I just add one thing as well, which just dawned on me as well? Being collaborative, to me, it's very similar to being trustworthy. You can't be trustworthy 90% of the time and 10% you're not. That actually just means you're not trustworthy. I think it's exactly the same when you're being collaborative. You're either collaborative or you're not. It's not something that you can choose in your relationship, with your trading partner. You either have a collaborative relationship or you don't. So anybody who thinks they can turn the tap on and off as when it suits them, are probably the ones that were struggling during, the uncertain times.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because if you think about it in terms of like the relationships you have with other people, if someone only comes to you when they need something or when they're having a hard time, that becomes a really exhausting relationship to have to deal with. So if you're, if you're a business and your customer is only coming to you like when they're like, "Hey, I have a problem, I have a problem, I have a problem." It's kind of an exhausting relationship to have, and maybe you become less and less willing to work with them.
Yeah, I think collaborative is, when you think collaborative, you're looking a bit more long term. You're looking
Mhm.
at how do we succeed together, and it's a bit more of a horizon type vision, but with regular communication along that path,
Yeah.
as opposed to, and I know there was a webinar quite a while ago. Jeff Moyle from Rexel talked about kind of, focusing on, rather than focusing on the bigger picture, those who just focus on the a dollar here or there, they're missing the bigger picture.
Mhm.
And for me, that, it is so important. It has to be commercially viable for both sides,
Mm.
to be effective. But collaboration for me is, as we've said, it's that shared initiative. Ultimately, the end shared goal, both sides being profitable, but you have to share all the way up to that. Otherwise, you probably won't get that end goal that you're seeking.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, this has been a fruitful conversation, and I hope everybody tuning in was able to gain some valuable insights and take it back in terms of your partnerships, whether it be personal or business. But at the end of the day, Christina, thank you for coming on.
Of
If you'd like
course.
to get more information about our report, we encourage you to download it, and you can go to enable.com/white papers for more information. It's a lot of valuable insights. It's a really nice condensed report in terms of how to create alignment between you and your partners and the importance. So on that note, I think we're done. I think so, and we'll be
I think that
back in the next couple of weeks, because we're going to be at Catalyze. And when we come back from Catalyze, we're going to do a recap in case you missed it. But please do not miss this event. Do come. It's going to be a hoot. And Annie.
It's going to be
God,
great.
I broke it up. Yeah. Okay, cool. Everyone's got it. All right. Christina, Mark, till next time. Everybody else, thank you very much for tuning in. Take
Thank
care.
you.